Who's more blockchain than philanthropy? Okay, interesting. Pretty split. So if you guys didn't see the earlier presentation, the basic framework that we work within is nonprofits that are traditional nonprofits who don't currently fundraise crypto or aren't engaging in the space. We bring them into the fold. And then there's two parts to that. One is a crypto fundraising program. So actually having the right messaging, getting equipped to take crypto, and then finding the right people to build out a program where it's an actual revenue stream. And then the other piece is collaboration. So there's a lot of organizations, companies, sponsor potentials. Those organizations in the crypto and blockchain space are looking for legitimacy as well as opportunities to improve their marketing. They use a nonprofit's marketing engine to do just that. And then through those partnerships, they demonstrate that they are a legitimate actor, that they are an actual company and aren't treated as being so much on the periphery. So that's kind of the value prop from either side of that. Yeah.
So I think to get started, so you saw us make a donation to the Human Rights Foundation in Bitcoin, but let's kind of talk through how they got to the point of where they are now of having this big program. So to start, we're going to just pick a nonprofit or make up a nonprofit. What's a cause someone wants to use for a hypothetical nonprofit?
Anybody, any cause? Something.
Save the turtles from those plastic rings.
All right.
Okay.
Save the turtles.
All right, give me a country.
Mexico.
Okay.
All right, so the Mexican Turtle Foundation. And let's just assume it's a pretty traditional nonprofit, not much experience or knowledge of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So the nice thing about that is, not a whole lot of traditional nonprofits would be in this space. So the first thing they have to do is get their executive team up to speed on, what is blockchain, what is crypto, hopefully some industry-specific use cases. So for this, like environmental or Turtle Foundation, you could do things like tracking, let's say, pollution in some way, or you could just go the more traditional CSR route, getting crypto donations, things like that.
Yeah. So the basic framework is intro education, set up a wallet solution, press release, and media push. Intro education is you can have a person at a nonprofit who's into blockchain and cryptocurrency, but if not everyone is on board, you get a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. There's always someone on staff who says, what is this? Or is cryptocurrency just something used by drug dealers? So we get all of the key decision makers into one room and we do an intro education session. We go through some of the basic FAQs and then we do some independent research prior to that and look at use cases that are happening within that industry. So you already kind of mentioned it. If you're tracking plastics, not only where they're being shipped from, but where they end up, there could be companies in the blockchain space that are doing that. And if not, we look at some more general use cases and walk them through how the technology works. Organization becomes more comfortable all around. We set up a wallet solution. The way you take crypto is important because there's a lot of different ways you can take it, a lot of different exchanges. Each of them has their own fees. They have their own user interface. And then how you integrate it into your site is important as well. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to contribute, and then you determine your own KYC. So we set up a wallet solution. Our solution has an API that we developed that we build into it that automatically converts it to cash. That auto conversion shelters you from volatility. So if Bitcoin's price goes down while you're asleep, you get a big donation. Get $1 million donation, it drops by 10%. You wake up, you have 900 grand. That's a problem. So we have an auto conversion feature, so you get the amount that comes in. And then in terms of the user interface, we generally have a QR code, like you saw up there, makes it easy to copy and paste. The end user just puts that code in, sends you the donation, and then using a Wallet Explorer, they can see transparently how much money has ever gone into that wallet in that given cryptocurrency. That's the transparency element. And then the press release and media push, what we do is we make sure that everyone within the community, blockchain crypto community, knows that you take crypto, because if they don't know that, no one's going to be showing up to your site as a traditional donor and go, oh, they take Bitcoin. I'll go and I'll buy Bitcoin for the first time, give them that instead. It's really kind of a new donor demographic, generally millennial. And we want to make as many people as possible aware that you're open for business when it comes to crypto donations.
Yeah, the general idea we want to get across with this example of the Mexican Turtle Foundation is even if a nonprofit isn't like a tech nonprofit, really anyone can develop a program around fundraising cryptocurrencies. So in this example, The Mexican Turtle Foundation would say, we're excited about blockchain. Our staff is trained on the basics. We think it's going to change the world in terms of saving turtles because of X reason. We're going to have more transparency on tracking pollution, all these different things. You develop some sort of marketing and press schedule to kind of get the word out that your organization is pro-blockchain, pro-crypto. Say, we're taking Bitcoin donations, we're taking Ethereum donations. Maybe there's an environmentally friendly coin you partner with as well. And you start developing this brand in the space. So it could be looking for someone to sponsor an event. Let's say they have a gala dinner to raise money and they want to bring in the blockchain community. Those are the kind of things they would want to do to develop a physical and an online presence with this community to build out a program all about, how they're engaging with and working with the blockchain community. And because so few organizations are doing it, there's a lot of people out there and organizations as well that want to work with nonprofits for a lot of different reasons. So part of it is, they want legitimate partners who help legitimize their organization or their project in the process. And at the same time, they've probably made a lot of money in this space the last few years, and this is a great way for them to tie it into some marketing as well. And kind of the bang for your buck when you're working with a nonprofit is pretty great. Whenever one of these nonprofits announces they're accepting crypto, does some basic marketing around it, it generally goes viral. If you think of, for example, we work with the Lupus Foundation. If you just Google crypto Lupus Foundation, you wouldn't think the Lupus Foundation has a very natural fit for crypto fundraising, but because it's still so early and still so new, pretty much anyone can make it work if you're willing to put some time and resources into it.
Yeah, and if anyone was in here for the previous session, you heard conversations around tribal behavior, how people form tribes and how that can be destructive to a social fabric. There's also positive aspects to that. So the same tribal influences that create, a glass ceiling for certain people that they can't break through is the same tribal nature that gets people to band together and rebel against the existing narrative or framework. The crypto space is incredibly tribal, and that comes from the same thing that makes anyone tribal. If you feel a great deal of resistance, like you're pushed to the outside, you now become a part of a community, and you want to see that community thrive. When nonprofits take crypto donations, another big reason that it spreads is because no one believes in it outside of our community. So a lot of folks think that cryptocurrency is a negative influence overall, that it's used by drug dealers, used by criminals, doesn't provide any actual utility. The more time you spend at conferences like this, you obviously recognize there are social impact use cases. Every press release that a nonprofit is taking crypto, every partnership they have, every time a major crypto corporation sponsors some nonprofit event or makes a major contribution, that narrative shows, the blockchain space is something beyond what the general public feels it is. So we'll start going through some of the this row here on the bottom. That beginning, that general package, some organizations just want to be equipped to take crypto, and they'd like the world to know that they take it. So intro education, wallet solution, press release, and an initial media push. Some organizations don't want to go beyond that. But if they do want to go beyond that, the two big things they want to do is, one, develop a crypto fundraising, not only program, but brand. And then the other thing is form partnerships. So when it comes to forming a brand, as someone who fundraises crypto, there's a line on either side of the fence here. There's a line of nonprofits trying to fundraise crypto, and then there's a line of people who are donating cryptocurrency. And ultimately, there are people at the front of either one of those lines, and you're kind of jockeying for position. So you can take crypto and not tell anybody. It's on your site. No one's going to arrive there and make a donation. It could hypothetically happen, but you want to increase your odds. So things we look at are key events throughout the year that are more general. So Giving Tuesday, end of year giving, and then an awareness month. Making sure that while you're doing that big awareness push, you're making it clear to people that give crypto, we also take it in this form. And then the other thing we look at are big dates that have to do with cryptocurrency and events that the nonprofit does a lot of press around. So we try to get a really good view of when does the nonprofit get the most attention, how to integrate it as effectively as possible, and do that consistently. So leading up to that, we develop a social media plan that has cryptocurrency messaging around it. We look to KOLs, key opinion leaders in the crypto space, to help them brand that message. An example would be like when we do a webinar and we have someone who's popular in the crypto space go on to that webinar and make a live donation. Everyone pays attention to that. They know that they're open for business. That moves up their brand. We try to get them listed on aggregators, so websites that people go to figure out who takes crypto, which is important around tax season. And then the other thing is blockchain partners. So if you can get a sponsor at, say, you have a gala like the Lupus Foundation, so they got a contribution from PureStream. They developed blockchain applications for IBM. They sponsored at the Lupus Foundation Gala, and then they filled a couple tables with cryptocurrency KOLs in the New York area. They made contributions to the Lupus Foundation. They knew prior to that who was going to be there, develop social media, and then use that press to generate more attention, and then fundraise toward the end of the year, because they were doing that October and November. So I guess that's a use case for the crypto fundraising program. Maybe you want to touch on how we do partner acquisition?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, there's partners out there in the blockchain and crypto space who aren't working with many nonprofits. That's really why we started this, actually, is because we didn't think there was enough collaboration between the blockchain space and the nonprofit space. So there's actually blockchain projects out there realizing now that this is a really great way, like I said earlier, to market their products or their coins, whatever it is. But it's also an adoption campaign in a sense, because these audiences from the nonprofits are much more traditional than the audience they're reaching on their online chat room or their Twitter. So it's a way for them to reach an entire new user base who maybe doesn't know much about crypto. And especially when it's coming from a legitimate organization like a nonprofit like the Lupus Foundation. It makes people feel much more at ease about crypto and blockchain, a little less scary, I think, for people when nonprofits are using it. And we really see some of these partnerships as driving more mainstream adoption. You know, it might be the only time someone thinks about crypto or blockchain in a positive light, because so many people have a very basic understanding only of it, and they only hear about it when the price of Bitcoin is going down in the news. So we're trying to get away from that and essentially shine a light on that. So for example, a recent partner with the Human Rights Foundation is, if you're familiar with Brave browser, you'll heard of that. It's a browser that competes with like a Mozilla Firefox, Chrome, things like that, except they have a lot of privacy features built in and actually pay back ad revenue to the users. What they're rolling out is the equivalent of like a Google Ad Grants program. So we're piloting it right now at the Human Rights Foundation. They're getting 4 months of free ads to test this out. And the basic idea is that the users of this browser are much more crypto and blockchain friendly or savvy than the average user. So it's a great opportunity for these nonprofits to fundraise crypto from this community. Brave already has 6 million monthly users, and in the first 20 days of this pilot, they got over 600,000 impressions. So pretty significant activity from running this pilot so far. And this summer we'll be rolling it out to a couple other nonprofits.
Yeah. So that's kind of the general idea. There's a lot of industry partners, potential industry partners out there. We go to them, and we kind of exist in the middle ground because not everyone's thinking about the value proposition from the other one's perspective. So the basic idea would be we have Maker as a good other partner. They have a stable coin. So that has a lot of utility across sectors, but it's also got a great deal of nonprofit utility, because if they're going to do transparency initiatives where money's moving from position A to B to C to D, and they want to show that transparency all along the line, if there's volatility in the cryptocurrency along that route, you're not able to run those sorts of transparency initiatives. So Maker's trying to generate press and show the utility of their token. They can do that with nonprofit partners. So an example of that, Lupus Foundation has they have a walk in San Francisco in October. And then they're going to do the traditional sponsor route. They're going to pay for a sponsorship at that walk so they can be a headline sponsor. But they're going to have, instead of a booth set up where they're just handing out T-shirts, they're going to have screens up where you can see the volatility of a cryptocurrency versus the lack of volatility in their cryptocurrency. You're going to be able to donate DAI day of on the walk. They'll have some burner wallets, they call it, which is pretty much cryptocurrency stored on a wallet that you can't take with you, but you can scan it, make a contribution to LFA. And then see how it transparently got from position A to position B. At the end of the day, you'll be able to see how much money went into the Lupus Foundation coffers. And then they're going to bring in, hopefully, other blockchain organizations with them to show, like Wire, which is an exchange they partner with. And they're going to collaboratively have a presence at a nonprofit event. And rather than paying $5,000 for a press release or whatever other direction they would go, they get a nonprofit partner out of it. They collectively market together because they both have marketing engines. And you get to see the utility of the actual cryptocurrency. And again, the Lupus Foundation has no direct correlation with blockchain. The value proposition isn't necessarily there right off the bat. But if you are a nonprofit organization that knows that there is value in pursuing them as vested or non-vested corporate partners, there's a lot of opportunity out there because not everyone's trying to go after that. So I guess what we can do next, who here again represents a nonprofit or is with a nonprofit? So what would your cause be?
The calls to action?
Yeah. Or the mission, yeah.
Well, our organization is called Peace Accelerators, and we architect peace building operations with our community. So on one side, we're a community that is based on community service, and then on the other side, we're a 501c3 nonprofit that we bring the community together to architect different operations, such as one's about farming and agriculture and refugees. That initiative is called Farms Not Arms. We're building that out in Lebanon, and then our second one is about coral restoration.
So is the farming portion initiative, is that looking at sustainable farming practices as a portion of it?
Yeah, and a refugee camp.
So yeah, that kind of ties into what Rick is doing. So like Rick at Mercy Corps, nonprofit organization, they got blockchain partners together, and what they're doing is, rather than just saying that they're trying to promote sustainable farming practices, they're actually using QR codes on coffee beans that are coming out of South America. As they travel up to the end consumer, you can see that they've been farmed in a sustainable way, that they've gone through the processes that you'd think they'd go through, that they weren't being treated with anything that you wouldn't want them to. They were stored in a safe way as they made it to you. And when they get to the end consumer can actually scan a QR code and contribute directly to the farmers that grow their food as a kind of like tipping mechanism. So they're doing actions like that. They've got Accenture as a part of that. Who else behind that? MasterCard?
Yeah, MasterCard.
Yeah, so traditional stakeholders in addition to cryptocurrency and blockchain stakeholders. So that's a potential use case. Anyone else with a nonprofit associated with a nonprofit? I saw more hands earlier.
We work in media, but we work with a number of nonprofits. Wouldn't say start a media company. And I'm just thinking about a lot of the traditional nonprofits we work with, and most of whom probably don't understand blockchain and wouldn't know how to apply it. So when you're doing your intro education, what's the biggest sort of challenge you hear from the senior executives who maybe are a little more traditional and have no idea what any of this stuff means?
Yeah.
How do you persuade them? What are the questions they have? What are the misunderstandings they have?
So two big things. One is it legitimate? Does the technology actually perform some sort of function? Is it being used by criminals? And the other piece is, how big is this really? Because if they're not hearing about it, they assume that it's tiny. So we talked about this in the earlier presentation, but if you Google, or if you go to Google Trends and you put in Bitcoin as a search term, like as a part of any query, it's just a component of it. Bigger than Kim Kardashian, bigger than Taylor Swift, bigger than Donald Trump. Not bigger than Trump, if you break it off of Donald Trump, I recall from my research, but still very big. Tesla, like you can go along and you can think about any concept, so more people are searching it, and that's currently, while the price is not at the 20,000 mark, it was obviously much bigger back then. The user base is somewhere in the range of 50 million, and it continues to go up. And then the price appreciation, I guess, would be another big one. They think that it crashed kind of following the 20,000 price point, now that it's down around 8,000. People don't have a long-term view of it because they weren't paying attention back when it was small. But for reference, if you bought $100 worth of Bitcoin in 2010, it would be worth somewhere in the range of $13.5 million today. $100 would be worth $13.5 million, in case you didn't hear me the first time, which keeps me up at night because I thought it was nonsense back then. Yeah, so over time, we have an infographic we can release probably as a part of this following the presentation. But you can look at if you bought $100 worth of Bitcoin year after year after year, it appreciated greatly. It's the best appreciating asset in the last 5 years and in the last 10 years. So it's not going anywhere. I would say that's a bigger misconception even than the utility and misuse, or that there are malefactors using it primarily. They're like, this isn't even worth paying attention to. And then we talk about hundreds of millions of dollars getting donated. And then organizations like Ripple, 50 million to universities, 29 million to Donors Choose, 4 million to the Ellen DeGeneres Wildlife Fund. That's one organization behind one cryptocurrency, and no nonprofits are really getting in line. Yeah, and then I guess the active online community. Like how big, like whenever they do a press release, it's the biggest press release of the year. Or if we get a CEO to post on their LinkedIn that they're taking cryptocurrency, they get fired up and they're confused why they're getting so much engagement. Some of that's positive, some of it is people who don't necessarily believe in it. But it's just kind of exciting, and it's a really good marketing tool for someone like the Lupus Foundation, where it's a cause most of you probably don't know what lupus is. And that's a way that they're just kind of bringing folks into the fold and getting people to pay attention.
And one more piece on that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny. Often the people who are most against it at first, they're really skeptical and really asking us a lot of questions, end up being the ones who all of a sudden something kind of clicks, and then they love it. And the next day they're sending us articles like, "Did you see Facebook has a cryptocurrency coming? Did you see J.P. Morgan has a cryptocurrency coming?" And then, ever since then, for example, a Lupus Foundation CEO sends us articles on a weekly basis. Like, look how cool this is. So it's funny how that swaps somehow.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, that's a big part of why we started the business. Like, we saw a value proposition, we saw nonprofits that were getting donations, we saw organizations that wanted to partner and didn't have a whole lot of opportunities when it came to nonprofits. My background was in nonprofits, but the big piece is, if we're being perfectly frank, it's just exciting. Cryptocurrency is exciting, everyone pays attention to it. If you can use that excitement and awareness to tie that back in with your nonprofit, $1 million donation is not a news story. $1 million Bitcoin donation is a news story, and a big one at that. And there aren't a whole lot of nonprofits trying to get on these podcasts, present at these conferences, build a brand for themselves within the space. So that's the value proposition for the time being, that it is not a crowded market. And then eventually when everyone's using it, it'll just be like taking a credit card. And then again, the value proposition will be there as well.
Patrick or Alex, just real quick question. Before you do your launch on the digital marketing media press, do you work with the board or with the finance committee to try to build into policy some language around crypto gifts or acceptance of crypto? And it seems to me there's a little delicate language that you might want to use if you're saying you're agnostic about property that's donated to the nonprofit, but you're not necessarily endorsing crypto over other kinds of donations that they might receive. How does that play out with boards, for example?
Yeah, so the board isn't, sometimes that can be an issue if there's someone that's resistant on the board, but we work more closely with, let's say, the CFO and the finance team. And they do tend to be more traditional because they're worried about reporting and accounting of it and all those things.
In terms of gift value, do you have back and forth with accountants because of the nature of the property now?
So in terms of how they account for it and how they treat it for tax purposes, it's just like stock donations. That's how the IRS is classified as a property donation. And because it's being sold within 10 seconds of it coming in with the API, auto-converting it, the donor is getting the amount pretty much, right at the time that they're sending it as a write-off. Does that answer your question, or did I miss a piece of it?
Yeah, that does. I'm just thinking in terms of, from the nonprofit side, how you might put in your policy something that is kind of carefully crafted to accept donations of property from the crypto world, but not necessarily take a public position about it. I guess there are organizations that do that.
So yeah, you could, let's just say, open a couple wallets, put them on your website, but not necessarily have like a press release or tell anyone about it. There are organizations that do that, but honestly, you're not going to get many donations that way. So, if no one knows that you're doing it, yeah.
Yeah, and then another big thing we do is cryptocurrency is kind of like saying websites, like saying this organization likes websites. You're not saying I like one website specifically or go here for your information. It's like a whole asset class. It's a very broad category, but there are organizations that will and have come to us trying to work with nonprofits that we don't think are legitimate. And maybe they made a bunch of money doing an ICO, and they're trying to do some marketing, and they're trying to align themselves with a nonprofit organization because they want to be seen as legitimate, because frankly, they're not legitimate. So screening is a part of that process as well. It's just like any other industry. There are going to be organizations that aren't doing the right things, as far as we can tell. So saying that you endorse Bitcoin, for instance, which is more or less independent on its own, is very different than some random cryptocurrency company approaching you, offering to give you a big chunk of money to start saying you're endorsing it. Especially if they're, in a fundraising stage, that could be sketchy. But again, that's kind of part of what we're there for.
So obviously it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to pay you guys your consulting fee and then not roll it out publicly and then raise an negligible amount. I think it's probably fair to say that there's a window here where there's a balance to be gotten if you make a big splashy, big set crypto rollout. And at some point in the foreseeable future, it will become much more easier to onboard, and it will be much more widely accepted, and every nonprofit will accept cryptocurrency contributions So how do you expect to kind of evolve your offerings as it becomes more commonplace and less of a novelty?
So we're kind of still figuring it out, right? It's hard to say how long that's going to take. You know, it could be a couple of years, it could be 5 years. But I think we'll evolve with the space as it changes. Some other things that could happen, let's say it really goes mainstream and it becomes as common as, you know, credit card donations, everyone's investing in their 401k in Bitcoin. I mean, at that point, some other things could be something like managing cryptocurrency portfolios for nonprofits, just like they have someone managing their stock portfolios now. Things like that, right? And there's still going to be a need for people building these partnerships, building these relationships, just like you do now with traditional companies. So we'll kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I see the transition from where we're at now with the excitement and the borderline adoption, then going into full-on adoption. You're talking about that switch. But prior to that, there was an initial stage, which was where the technology was beginning to be understood. People were starting to buy it. There was a small group of people who had it, and it appreciated greatly. Again, if you bought it at 10 cents for each Bitcoin, and then it's eventually worth $150, like 150 is way less than 20,000, but if you got it at 10 cents, you made a great deal of money. There was a window there as well where there were even far fewer nonprofits taking it, just some trailblazers. And a good example would be the Internet Archive. So back in that earlier phase, they got a 2,700 Bitcoin donation at one point, and they immediately sold it to a member of their staff who held on to it. That would be worth, I think, tens of millions of dollars, or at least over $10 million. They sold it. It was worth $2 each. So they sold it for $5,400. So that happened. Some organizations now are holding it in the form of an endowment. Like the Human Rights Foundation, they're starting to develop an endowment. We know a couple other nonprofits who are actually going to hold on to Bitcoin, but not other crypto assets because they see the upside. But like, God bless you. You can sleep through the volatility. But if you close your eyes and you take a Rip Van Winkle nap and you wake up 3 years later, the trends thus far have been you'd have a great deal more money if you don't need it for your operations. So back then, there was no real excitement, no mainstream adoption, but the technology was there, and there were some early adopters who had some money. Now, there's more people who have some money, but there's excitement, and it's kind of strange and unique and impressive to take crypto, and you can develop a brand in the space because there aren't a lot of stakeholders. And then the third phase will be a great deal of adoption. At that point, it becomes like taking credit cards. So some nonprofits say we want to wait until everyone's using it. It's like, well, then you're not going to fundraise crypto based on the fact that it's crypto. You're going to fundraise crypto same way you take a credit card. You don't stand up at a gala and say, where are my credit card people at? And we have had people say, where are my crypto people at a gala? And everyone gets fired up in the back of the room. Yeah, so those are the three phases.
To your point earlier about potentially bad actors accepting donations, how do you sort of vet that out in such a way that donors can have confidence? And then in reverse, how does an organization accepting donations, attribute those donations to the proper donor, given the anonymous nature of where the funds came from?
Yeah, so a little different with each nonprofit we work with, depending on what kind of information they want to collect. But generally, we leave it totally up to the discretion of the nonprofit if they want to collect, let's say, first name, last name, email, whatever else they'd collect on other donations. But beyond that, I mean, some nonprofits we work with are willing to actually take anonymous donations because they're accepting anonymous donations for other gifts as well. I mean, some people might say, like, well, how do you know, this isn't coming from a drug dealer or something like that? I mean, I think the likelihood of a drug dealer deciding to donate all their crypto to charity is slim to none. But then, of course, there's also, companies like Chain Analysis and the exchanges who are in some ways kind of keeping a pulse on these illegal funds being moved around.
So just in the more vanilla scenario, so I make a donation in Bitcoin because I didn't, I don't want to take the tax loss, but I do want the tax credit for it. How is it that the recipient is, acknowledges my donation, just off of a wallet that it came from in such a way that, I can get the tax credit? Yeah, so in order to get a tax receipt, you have to give the nonprofit your email so they can send it to you. That's kind of the basic requirement if you want a tax receipt. That's kind of it, yeah. So if you want to donate anonymously, you won't get a tax receipt. Right.
If I could jump in on that, at Mercy Corps, we don't accept anonymous donations. We do accept crypto. We simply put a KYC form before it displays the public address of our Bitcoin wallet. So they have to get through that form first, and then they get the address, they make the donation, and it also covers them for tax purposes.
Cool, thanks.
Does that tie a physical address to their Bitcoin address? Like a personal, like, if you don't accept anonymous addresses, there's some link there somewhere between my real identity and my.
Or at least the address of that particular wallet, yeah.
So any other questions on the part that we're in right now? We can jump ahead. Okay. Next thing I want to do.
We've only got 5 minutes left, too.
Oh, okay. We'll do it quick. I guess we'll have to do it over on this side. So just kind of an actual hypothetical run-through of what this might look like if we're working with a nonprofit organization. They decide to do an actual crypto fundraising program. Let's say they've got a big fundraiser at the end of the year, and they're going to try to fundraise crypto around that. Their considerations prior to it and then following it. So some of the basics are have a social media plan in place, engage the crypto and blockchain press, whether that's drafting an op-ed, doing an interview on a podcast, whatever else it might be. And then a pitch for the sponsors. So making it clear to sponsors that they can showcase what their actual product is, have a presence at the event. It's not just a brand popping up, but maybe there's some other way to engage with the organization. How do you make it tailored to that organization in a way that they find it valuable, the same way you would approach any other non-vested partner? And then if we're looking at the way it might break down, so let's say they've got that event, what do we need to do? So night of, you're going to have QR codes at every table so that folks can see where they can contribute crypto day of. You might invite some crypto KOLs who want to have a presence at that event. You know, there's going to be press, marketing that's going on around it. Why would they not want to show themselves as participating in it? Maybe do a live donation that can be coordinated ahead of time. Again, if their thing is being an influencer on social media or a key opinion leader, it's just another opportunity for them, and they're not getting approached by a lot of organizations. For the sponsors, maybe they're doing a demo of their technology where individuals can come up, get a burner wallet, scan it, and then make a contribution to the organization. They can have that live update. Let's say on the screen during the event, you're getting traditional cash donations or in US dollars, and you're also getting crypto donations. If you have a visualizer going up there, the cash donations coming up, you can also have a visualizer for the crypto. And then I guess another thing is you're going to have whoever your auctioneer is on stage, let them know that crypto donations are a part of it, have that messaging happening day of, and then when you're capturing the content, the video, putting that out on social media, advertising it effectively, coordinating with the KOLs that are there, making sure the sponsors are involved, they're getting shouts out. You can pull them aside, do a quick interview. And then by the end of the night, you might have, you know, an interview with a crypto influencer who has, you know, a top 3 podcast within that space. You have an interview with the CEO of one of these organizations that's doing a demo. You're taking crypto via the QR codes night of. You can also put the QR codes on your website. So when people are sending people to the link, you can actually get participation in the event remotely, see how much crypto you can raise. You could also hypothetically have a competition between different cryptocurrency projects. They both want to sponsor and come in. You say, okay, let's see which community can fundraise more. And then whoever fundraises more gets a community award of some sort. You can honor an organization. It's the same way you would really approach any other industry, but it's targeted to this demographic. And what's interesting about it is they have an actual underlying technology and then something they're trying to demo. So you can look at that in terms of donation transparency. You can look at that in terms of a use case. If you're like a Rick from Mercy Corps, where you're actually using the technology in a boots on the ground kind of way, giving them an opportunity to speak at the event. And then the big thing is if you're leveraging blockchain, if you're actually using the tech like a Mercy Corps, one of these other organizations, there are a lot of nonprofits using blockchain in a really amazing way that aren't tying that in with the crypto fundraising program. So they're coming to an event like this, they're speaking at Consensus, you know, the largest crypto conference. They're going around the world, they're doing podcasts, they're implementing blockchain in a really amazing way that people want to share, circulate those stories and cover it, but they're not tying that into, you know, we're doing this is fantastic for crypto adoption, now please support us as we support adoption, tying those two things together. So even if you are, so this could hypothetically be, what was our turtle one? Mexican Turtle Foundation? It could be the Mexican Turtle Foundation, it could be the Lupus Foundation, or it could be Girls Who Code, or Code to Inspire, like we heard in the earlier event, where you actually have content just sitting there ready to use because it appeals to the community inherently. There's a way pretty much for any nonprofit organization to tailor the system in a way that is appealing, and that's kind of the way we work out these systems. Good?
All right. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions before we get Diego up here?
All right, guys, thank you so much for
Thank you guys for joining.